The High Republic era of the Star Wars universe debuts in live action this week with The ACOLYTE, a murder mystery set within the ranks of the Jedi Order. The show hits the ground running as we introduce to the ACOLYTE, a young woman played by Amanda Stenberg, who has been sent to Ueda to kill Master Indara, played by the always wonderful Carrie-Anne Moss. This is a great way to open your show. It's got action and intrigue and really shows off the series' fantastic fight choreography, which feels like it's something of a mix between classical martial arts, a bit of kung fu, 1970s kung fu movies, and anime, especially in the way that the assassin presents themselves to Master Indara, basically challenging the Jedi to fight her with all her power, which feels like a very Dragon Ball Z sort of thing to do, something which Star Wars needs more of, I think. Eventually, we learn that Indara and the assassin have a history as she recognizes the woman, but it comes too late as she is killed by the assassin. This sets the show's premise into motion as the Jedi are alerted and now have to find out who has killed one of their own. After the big opening, we're introduced to Osha, a young woman also played by Amanda Stenberg. Only Osha is working as a mechanic, a human mechanic on a Trade Federation ship that does a lot of the dangerous works the Neimoidians don't want to waste their droids on. Osha and her little droid Pip go on about their job until two Jedi, Yord Fandar and his apprentice Tassie Loa, arrive on the ship to question her. The way the show drip feeds new information and introduces us to these new characters is really quite cool, because over the course of these two episodes we learn that a lot of these characters have some sort of history with one another, and there's like this tapestry starting to form where maybe they're all related to one another through one being the Padawan of someone else, or one having had a relationship with another somewhere down the line. And I like that it's kind of weaving this giant tapestry and causing a bit more intrigue in what exactly is going on here. Yord reveals to Osha, who we learn is a former Jedi Padawan, that Master Indara was killed, and it was seemingly by Osha, with even the alien bartender from the bar that Indara was killed in confirming that Osha was indeed the one who killed Indara. It's also revealed that Osha would actually have kind of a good reason to want to kill Indara, being that she was one of the many masters who decided that Osha was a little too old to be trained as a Jedi and wanted her removed from the Order. So there's a little bit of a precedence there for her to want Indara and many other Jedi dead. Yord arrests Osha and sends her to Coruscant on a prison ship to await trial by the Jedi. The show continues introducing us to the cast as we meet Master Sol, played by Lee Jung-jae. Sol is very much a bit more of a traditional Jedi by way of Qui-Gon Jinn, in that while he practices things like searching the Force and, being mystical and whatnot, there's a practicality to him, and he would rather act than wait for the Force to show him or wait for the Jedi's politics to kick in and decide what to do. He's a man of action. We learn that Sol was once Osha's master and is told that she has been caught by Master Vernestra Rowe. Vernestra is a character from the High Republic books and one of my all-time favorites from that era, so getting to see her all grown up and in live action is really awesome. She doesn't do really anything in these first two episodes besides relay information to our main characters. I do know she's going to get a little bit more involved in the show as it goes on, and I'm really excited because her story through the High Republic novels is great. It's tragic, it's full of action and adventure, and just to see, because in those books she is like a little girl and she comes from like a Padawan up to a knight and then a master, and here we see her as like an aged master, so that's really quite cool to see where she ends up. I also like that she's kind of playing like a political role in this, in that she doesn't like the idea that someone is out there killing Jedi just because it makes the Jedi seem like they are weak. It kind of puts them on the back foot politically speaking, so that's quite interesting that she's playing that type of role where she's sort of ingrained in like obviously the politics of being a Jedi in the Republic and their role in the Republic, and there's a great dynamic compared to like what she was in the books, where she was a little bit more of an adventurer and a woman of action, so I'm intrigued to see if we dive a little bit into her backstory as well through this series. Sol and his Padawan Jackie, played by Daphne Keane, are sent with Yord to find Osha, since during her trip back to Coruscant, Osha's prison ship crashed thanks to a breakout of the prisoners. The breakout sequence was a great showcase of all of the weird freaks this show's creature shop has come up with, and in just these two episodes they've really gone all out to show some really great looking aliens, not just your usual, Rodians or Nikto or anything like that, or a Clactoonian in the background or anything. Neil Scanlon, the guy behind the Creature Shop who did some stuff on the sequel trilogy as well, is back for this show, and I like that he's just got this weird and wonderful look at all these different creatures, from like weird looking cyborg people to a cool alien that has like a big tentacle in its nose. And we also get some stuff from Legends coming back, like the Selkath race from Knights of the Old Republic make an appearance in episode 2. Osha's prison ship crashes on the icy world of Karlak, and while in a daze, Osha and us learn that she has a twin sister, whom she and the Jedi thought dead when her village was burned down, and she's very much still alive, and very much the acolyte that is killing the Jedi, all in the service of a Sith. This is one thing I actually knew before the show began, that there was a twin dynamic going on, and I'm actually really surprised they got to it so soon. I thought that was going to be sort of like a mid-season twist, you know, that it's not revealed up until this part that she has a twin, and then it's revealed and it's like, oh my god, this kind of throws everything into question. So I'm really intrigued that they just kind of got it out of the way really quickly in the mid part of episode 1. Eventually, Sol, Yord and Jeki find Osha on Karlak and bring her in, with Sol fully believing that his old Padawan is not behind this, especially since while they've been hunting Osha, there's been another killing. And it's here it's revealed that all the Jedi that have been killed thus far have been involved in the village that Osha and May were from. They were from that planet. They were stationed on that planet when that incident happened. And this is a great setup for a mystery, since it implies that either the Jedi did something in that village, or they failed to do something and they are all covering it up, because no one seems to have like talked about what happened there, and there seems to be a mystery behind them wanting to sort of let it go and let it be in the past. I can't help but compare them to, like, you know, when you hear stories of like police officers doing something wrong and then trying to cover it up with like a bunch of their police officer friends, and it becomes like this conspiracy of lies that they're telling for one another just to keep each other out of jail, and it all kind of falls apart there at the end. This isn't something we've really seen in Star Wars media before, and I love that it's finally catching up to what some of us fans kind of realized a while back, that hey, maybe the Jedi aren't all that good and were, you know, incredibly arrogant and staunch in their beliefs, that to a point where it was their downfall. Leslie Headland, the showrunner and director of these episodes, clearly understands this, and I'm really excited to explore this side of the Jedi. And again, this is like a transition period from the heroic High Republic Jedi we see in the comics and the novels into the more scared and closed-minded prequel era Jedi, and I'm really looking forward to seeing all of that sort of closed-mindedness start to seep in, especially because we obviously have the Sith in this series, and the Jedi were convinced that the Sith were extinct, when we know that that's not the case at all. So I'm intrigued to see how they're going to deal with this, and how maybe it'll end with like a big cover-up or something. If I had one big complaint for the show, it would be in its editing, especially with episode 1. It feels like episode 1 was cut up quite a fair few times, like just to kind of get timings down, I guess, or like trying to fit it into a certain time slot, which is very strange being that it's a streaming show, so they don't need to worry about time slots. It feels very sort of cutting from one thing to another very quickly, especially the end where the Sith does the big speech he has on the shore of that island, and it literally cuts into his speech. He like literally finishes it, and then the next second the credits roll. It's like they couldn't wait to get out of that, and it felt like they were hitting that arbitrary deadline that you would have on like a network TV, like, oh, we've got to finish it this time because then this next show starts. And it feels very strange, and that's really my only complaint with these 2 episodes, is the editing felt very off. Episode 2 of the show sees May going after Master Torban, another being tied to Indara and Sol, only she can't outrightly kill him as he's taken up a Barish vow. Hearing this word out loud kind of made me do that, you know, that sit-up meme that you see every now and then on Twitter, because the Barish vow is something from Charles Soule's Darth Vader comic, where former Jedi Kirak Infalia underwent the same vow, and Vader was sent to kill him without a weapon in order to get his lightsaber crystal. Again, Leslie Headland seems to know her stuff and is ingraining all this great canon lore from the comics and the novels and the other movies and TV series into her story so damn well. Thanks to not being able to get even close to Torben thanks to a force shield he has projected around himself, May turns to Quimir, a former gun runner and trader who acts a little like her kind of Q Gadgets quartermaster guy, gifting her a poison to use to kill Torben with. The thing being that this poison is actually from her homeworld. Quimir is a strange character since there is definitely more to him than meets the eye, but also I could totally see him being a red herring to throw us off who the Sith training May is. Like, he definitely could be it, and I'm leaning towards him definitely being somewhat involved as the Sith, mainly because when we actually see him end up getting into a little bit of a fight with May, he ends up defending himself very well, almost like he has force abilities. Sol, Jeki, Yord, and Osha eventually get onto May's trail on Olega, but arrive too late, finding Torben has taken the poison willingly, since it's heavily implied that he had something in his past he wasn't proud of, something to do with May, and him taking up this vow was his way of sort of tormenting himself and trying to forgive himself for his sins. However, the only way to absolve himself of his sins was to take the poison and die. I really do love all of the mystery stuff this show builds around what did happen with May and these Jedi. Like, there is definitely something going on here that the Jedi either covered up or made a huge mistake for and just don't want people to see that the Jedi are fallible at this point in time. So they've covered it up somehow, and May is looking to get revenge. And it has like great sort of hints of like spy movies or police procedurals, with the Jedi acting very nicely as detectives, trying to sort out the clues and find out who is exactly behind all of this. And they do eventually get put onto the trail of the Sith after they entrap Quimir by using Osha as a double for May, and Sol begins to suspect that someone is pulling the strings behind May and Quimir. Soon Sol is able to confront May and battle her, and it's a big highlight of this episode. And again, it's just more great martial arts action. I love that Sol never once used his lightsaber in the fight and never once actually willingly hit May either. He was just dodging and disarming her of all her weapons while doing it. It was wonderfully choreographed and wonderfully shot as well. I really liked how the characters moved and how Sol was just kind of acting like nothing was happening, just kind of like flowing through all of May's moves. It was great. And it was a great use of that Jedi don't use their weapons in attack, they only use it for defense, and only right when it needs to be used, and Sol didn't think it needed to be used here. It's something I think a lot of people have forgotten about the Jedi as well. They're keepers of the peace, not warriors, and I don't get the people that think that they should just whip out their lightsabers for everything, since they don't do that, and they make a point in this show to show that they don't do that. And it's why when people like Yord try and do that with their weapon, stands out a lot. And I want to talk about Yord now, because loads of people have been, standing Yord on social media, and that is great. He's a really cool character. I really quite like him, and I think it's mostly because he is a very hot character as well. But man, the minute I saw him try and use Jedi mind tricks on people to pry information out of them without like them wanting to willingly give it over, I knew he's going to be kind of a bit of a bad seed. Like, he hasn't actually done anything bad or wrong or anything, but I really get the feeling that if he was a real life cop, Yord would not hesitate to mag dump an elderly woman's Pomeranian and then actively justify why it was a vicious animal and everything and trying to attack him. All through both of these episodes, he's constantly pulling out his saber or putting himself in a position where he can and will use his powers to not really defend but almost attack. And it's really interesting to have a look at the Jedi at this time, because again, they're in that transition period from the more heroic ones to the more sort of arrogant, blinded Jedi. And I can see that in Yord, where he's, a by the book Jedi, but he's, kind of gung-ho, and, he really wants to use his weapon and really wants to use the Force to attack or like fight someone. May eventually is able to get away from the Jedi and seek out her next target, the Wookiee Jedi Kelnaka, who looks to have exiled himself to a forest world and is living in a very Yoda-like situation in like a broken down ship that's under a giant tree's roots, setting us up for the next episode. For its plot, the show is pretty easy to follow, but as a hardcore Star Wars fans, there's quite a few smaller plot points that I think are meant for like people like me who know these sorts of things and not for the average viewer, such as Quimir casually mentioning that he was a gun runner for the Hutts, and when we see Kalnaka at the end of the episode, he deals with the two gun runners who are both speaking Huttese, making me think that maybe they're like Quimir's like spies and they've gone on search for him, because Quimir seemed to know where Kalnaka was and these guys just happened to come upon him, you know, bit of a coincidence there. I also fully believe that Quimir is the Sith training May. Him hiding in plain sight in sort of like a jokey role is kind of like a total Sith move too, you know, you just have this other personality. And however, I don't think he's the Sith master. I think he's the Sith master's apprentice and he's training May to become his apprentice so they can kill the master. However, I think by the end of the show, both Quimir, May, and whoever else will be dead, but the master will be the only Sith left alive, and the master will probably be revealed to be someone from Legends or someone they'll bring back into canon like Tenebris or something like that. Another really interesting thing is that I think that May and Osha are a dyad, a dyad in the Force, much like how Rey and Ben Solo were. I think that just because of the talk they both have in like the Force vision they have, where they mention that they make up one whole, very much how we know a dyad works in the Star Wars universe, with them sort of being one half of a whole, something which we saw in Rise of Skywalker and the supplemental material. I'm not sure where they could go with that in terms of like May becoming a Sith apprentice, maybe Osha becomes a Jedi again or something. She hasn't really been able to tap into the Force throughout the show. She's tried, but it seems like she's been cut off because she hasn't used it for so long. So I have to imagine that them meeting or them coming into contact with each other would bring that back in both of them somehow. There's so many great theories that are coming out about this show, and I could sit here for hours talking about them, but I'm not. So I'm just going to say that the ACOLYTE is off to a very strong start, and despite a few issues I had with the editing, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and it's plainly obvious that the people behind it love and cherish Star Wars as much as I do, and ones who aren't afraid to bring new and interesting concepts to the table and kind of flip its head on some of the more casual tropes that Star Wars does very often. I can't wait to see more of this murder mystery unravel next week. I'm going to give both these episodes a 9 out of 10.